It's race week. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're talking, of course, about Formula 1 2020. This weekend, Formula 1 returns. The Austrian Grand Prix is our first race of the season. If you'd have told me that 6 months ago, I don't think I would have believed you, but here we are, the first of 8 confirmed races, 2 Austrian Grand Prix, a Hungarian Grand Prix, 2 British Grand Prix, a Spanish, a Belgian and an Italian. Some slightly different variations on the names of some of those Grand Prix for this season, but 8 races in Europe. Fingers crossed for a few more afterwards. Should be a blast. And I think all of us over these, I think we're at 214 days, maybe about 210 days. I think it's been since the last Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi. Goodness me, I am so looking forward to some racing. But today, our conversation is a bit of a season preview. But as you'll see, it's more of a laid-back chat about the season so far. You may have seen that yesterday I did a little chat, a little live podcast thingy-jiggy with Sean the F1 Word, Jonty's Corner and Chamber, and I'd planned to do this little talk afterwards, kind of just elaborate on what we spoke about yesterday and get across some of my points that I probably didn't have time to yesterday, and also do a few of my own predictions for the season ahead. So pretty much it's a light conversation, a preview and predictions. But I'm going to start off at the front of the field, and let's have a little chat about those top 3 teams. Mercedes, coming out of winter testing, they're looking good. They're looking strong. Implementation of DAS. They've got their 2 drivers. Lewis Hamilton, who's going for a 7th world title. Valtteri Bottas, who made big step forwards last year, and I think is certainly in a position to make another step forward again this season. Toto Wolff, still at the helm. He's going to be as good as ever. So Mercedes, I think, to be honest with you, are going to be as good, if not better, than ever. And at the beginning of the year, before we had testing, I did put Lewis Hamilton as my world champion for 2020, and I think I am still going to stick with that prediction for the season. Though I do think Bottas is going to be very, very close. And this is really a flip of the coin, but I do believe Valtteri will be, once again this year, Hamilton's closest challenger. But don't take Max Verstappen out of the mix. And actually, I think Red Bull will be close to Mercedes. I think Red Bull will be a pain in the backside for Mercedes this year. And I think Verstappen will be very, very close to those top 2. And I think, to be honest with you, to anyone could send me their thoughts. Verstappen first, Bottas second, Hamilton third. Any order for those 3 guys. And with some rationale, I would believe it. I think all 3 are going to be really, really close this season. Max, obviously, being the clear number 1 driver at Red Bull, that's going to be a huge, huge factor to play into this. He's another year experience in Formula 1, and I think he's really hungry now for that first world title. Hamilton, what a huge season this is going to be for him. He's going to be hungry for that 7th to equal Schumacher's record, and again, has established himself as that number 1. It's just the question of whether Bottas is going to be able to assert himself early doors in this season. And I kind of think that's why all 3 of them will be so close throughout the season. Because the first 2 races are the Austrian Grand Prix, the Red Bull Ring circuit. And it's a circuit where Valtteri Bottas excels. Seems to love it here. Pole position and race win in 2017. Pole position in 2018. Retired leading the Grand Prix in 2018. 2019 Mercedes overall weren't particularly strong, but it was Bottas who ended up on the podium. Lewis Hamilton down in 5th place. So I think Bottas, this could be some really strong hunting ground in Austria. And Max Verstappen, of course, winning the circuit the last 2 years on the trot, is a circuit he's very good at as well. Lewis Hamilton hasn't led a lap in Austria since 2016. I saw on a statistic from Sky Sports. Haven't double checked that one myself, but Sky Sports, I think that's a good enough source if I'm honest with you. But I still think Hamilton will be strong. I think Mercedes will have a very strong package showing up to that circuit. So certainly don't count him out. But it's anyone's game in those early races. Alex Albon, what a huge question mark that is going into the season. And I was having a little think yesterday. I think he could be a real dark horse if we have a wet weekend in the first race of the season. It's looking a bit 50-50. I've done my bit in the preview for the weekend, and that'll be coming out Thursday. Keep it. If you watch any of my videos this season, let it be the preview. I cannot wait for that one, the Austrian Grand Prix preview. And I was doing a bit of weather predictions, had a look at the actual weather predictions for Spielberg, and it's looking like there's about a 50% chance of rain on race day. And in the dry, I think Albon would have made progress over the winter, and I think having time to learn the car during winter testing will have done him a lot of good. I don't think he's going to be on the level of Max Verstappen just yet, and there's still question marks on whether he'll ever be able to do that, but certainly at the end of last season proved that he can be a solid number 2, and in Brazil would have got a podium until that contact with Lewis Hamilton. So the podium will come. I think it will come at some point this season, but if there is a wet Grand Prix, of course you're going to look to Hamilton and Verstappen to be right there at the front. But Alex Albon last year, in the German Grand Prix, in those torrential wet conditions, was really, really good. Was fantastic. Was one of the drivers of the day in that Grand Prix, if not for his teammate who was on the podium, Vettel who was from 20th to 2nd, and Verstappen that was almost faultless. But Albon was one of the few drivers that was indeed faultless on that particular day. Was class, considering it was his first ever wet Grand Prix. And I think could be a big surprise if we do have a wet Grand Prix over the first couple of weekends. But apart from that, I think he may need a bit of carnage up ahead if he wants to score a podium in the early few races. But he's certainly one of those drivers. I'm not really sure where to place him in my kind of prediction standings in my head. But at the beginning of the year, I went with 6th, and I'm still happy with that. And that leaves at the front the 2 Ferraris. Big question marks on whether Ferrari are indeed going to be at the front this season, and whether it's going to be Racing Point, the pink Mercedes, the Racing Point, they're going to take their place. I think that's a bit of an extreme view. I know the race firmly believe that Racing Point are going to be right in the mix. I'm a bit more sceptical. And though I'm not quite as engineering savvy as the race, they've got some experts there. I do think Ferrari are playing the game a little bit during winter testing. I think they're certainly a team that are going to be able to have the funds and the personnel to bounce back, even if they did have a bad testing. And I think it's important to remember that it's been 4 or 5 months since winter testing. Usually in a season, we would have seen a brand new updated car for Melbourne and also a Spec B car in Spain. And of course, we've passed both of those dates by now. And yes, they haven't had the data of all the Grand Prix and several practice sessions at several different circuits. But still, they will be back at Maranello or wherever a particular team is based, developing that car, doing simulation runs. Ferrari did a quick test at Mugello last week. So they're always learning, they're always developing, and I still think they've got a great lineup themselves in Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel. And I think that car, at points this season, will still be able to win Grand Prix, and they will still be a headache for your Mercedes, for your Red Bulls. But that driver lineup, Leclerc will be the number 1. He will be the favoured driver from Ferrari, but Vettel, who's kind of unchanged this year, I'm so looking forward to seeing what he can do. Seeing whether he is going to be able, with that pressure off a little bit, if he's going to be able to really push forward and kind of retake that number 1 status. That would be a fun storyline. Or whether he's going to falter this year with that lack of support. It's such an interesting storyline. But I think both Ferrari drivers, I think they'll have a good season. Racing Point then. I don't think they will be anywhere near that. Well, I think anywhere near that top 3 was going to be a bit of an over-exaggeration. I think they will be right in the fight for best of the rest. And I think Racing Point, McLaren and Renault will be the 3 teams at the front of that midfield. And I think they will both, all 3, be quite close to that top 3 teams. So I think the gap certainly will have dropped between the top 3 and the midfield. Last year, we saw on quite a few occasions the likes of Sainz, Norris, Perez, Ricciardo, even Raikkonen on occasion, Magnussen qualifying the top 5. So could we see that again this year? I think it's certainly plausible. I mean, Ricciardo got 4th, didn't he, in Canada last year in qualifying. So I think once again this year, drivers on odd weekends may spring a surprise. And Racing Point, I think, though it's very inventive, pardon the pun, by copying the Mercedes, very clever, that's for sure. And from a budget point of view, what a brilliant idea this is, to get a guaranteed quick car, but also not have to invest in R&D. Fantastic, whoever decided to go that route. But the issue with that is that in theory, it will be harder to upgrade and develop it, because they'll kind of be always one step behind Mercedes. Whereas there's other teams like McLaren and Renault that will be able to keep progressing their own philosophy and get even further up the grid. So my gut feeling still is that it will be McLaren and Renault that are 4th and 5th place. And I think Racing Point will come in just a bit behind. Again, I think when we show up to each circuit, it'll be your pick of the draw of which of those three teams will be best of the rest. And maybe, I don't know, let's just take Silverstone, for example. McLaren could be right there with Red Bull and Ferrari. We really don't know. But when I look at the pairing of Sainz-Norris, Ricciardo Ocon, they are better, or at least an overall package that is better than Perez-Stroll. And though I think Perez is one of those drivers deserving of a top seat and a real chance in a top seat, Lance Stroll, bless him, I think may hold the team back a little bit this year. And that's kind of why I've been sceptical on whether they'll keep him on long term. That's an interesting one to watch. I know a lot of people think that seat is nailed on, and they're certainly right to think that. But Perez, I think, is going to be a real force in the driver's standings. But from a constructor's point of view, I think McLaren, with that Sainz and Norris relationship, even with Sainz moving to Ferrari next year, I think that will still be happy days in that squad. Renault might be a little bit different. They're a team that certainly are a little bit salty at times, and they certainly haven't taken to the news of Ricciardo moving on very well, I think is more than we're best of putting it. And Esteban Ocon, we're not really quite sure what he's able to give to a team like Renault. I think we saw enough at Force India that he's going to be able to be a strong driver for them, but is he ready to be a team leader after a year out of Formula One whilst he's on a loan deal at the team? There's a lot of question marks there, so I think they will be behind McLaren. But I think Perez will be able to get in the mix with those four drivers, the two from McLaren and the two from Renault. In behind them, once again, it really is anyone's game. AlphaTauri have got two drivers that are going to be so hungry to prove himself this year. Likewise with Haas. Both of those drivers, I think, are in a direct fight between each other to hold on to a seat. I really do believe at least one of those will be moved on at the end of the year. And I think they're a team that really need a bit of a refresh. But they are two drivers that I think had moments last year of brilliance, but also some not so great moments. Magnussen did some cracking qualifying performances in Austria and Monaco, but also crashed in qualifying in Canada and in Japan. Grosjean crashed far less last year, which from a Grosjean fan point of view was brilliant, but there were still mistakes in there. But he was getting into Q3 more than Magnussen come the end of the season. And when you look at head-to-heads in the race, Grosjean was the better, but in qualifying it was Magnussen. So I think both of them are quite equal as drivers. That's going to be I'm going to get shouted at in the comments for that. But I think on their day, both of them, it would be a toss of the coin. But both of them on very thin ice. I would also throw in Alfa Romeo into the mix with those three teams. Kimi Räikkönen, is this his last season? And Giovinazzi, likewise, he's got a hell of a lot of Ferrari junior drivers nipping at his heels. He's got to have a great season if he wants to remain in Formula One. And Williams, how much of a step forward have they made? That new livery looks so nice. Hopefully that reflects the performance of the car. I think they'll be in the mix. I think they'll do better than last season. Will they still be last in the Constructors? Of course, they've got Nicholas Latifi, a rookie. Someone who performed well last year in Formula 2. Not fantastic, but well. Is he ready for that step up to Formula 1? I'm not quite sure, but George Russell is a driver I certainly think is more than capable of carrying that team. And maybe they could spring a surprise with only 8 races. If Russell can establish himself in Hungary, like he did last year, almost getting through to Q2, maybe get an 8th place, a 9th place even, that might be able to give them the edge in the Constructors. But certainly I think it's going to be the top 3 teams, then McLaren, Racing Point at Renault, and then I really do think it's anyone's game. And of course, we could show up to Silverstone, and Haas are good at that particular circuit, but they're not great at Belgium. And I really think it'll be just all over the place in that midfield, which realistically is what we want to see from Formula 1. And I have said for the last couple of years, get rid of those top 3 teams and you've got the most intense and incredible Formula 1 grid you've ever seen. So competitive it would be. But sadly, that's not the way. And sadly, the top 3 teams are just bossing it and are just a bit too good. I've gone with my predictions. I've thrown them in a little bit throughout the season. Of course, I will go out on a limb and say Nicholas Latifi will be Rookie of the Year. But then, actually, before I joke too much, we could see a reserve driver. I hope we don't, and I hope all the drivers are fine over the year, but we could indeed see a reserve driver, a Sergio Sette Camara at Red Bull potentially, a Jack Aitken at Williams, so I'll hold off on Rookie of the Year for Latifi, but he's probably got that one in the bag. World Champion, I do think it'll be Lewis Hamilton, but I think Verstappen and Bottas will be right there with him. Podiums this year. I mean, obviously, Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas. You can throw in the 2 Ferraris. I also think you can throw in Alex Albon. I think drivers will be rustier this year, and I think there will be more mistakes further down the grid, but also further up the grid. So I think we will see a few more DNFs from those top teams, and I think that could present opportunities not only to Albon, but also some of those midfield drivers. And a driver, I think, not only will be on the podium at some point this year, but I think could be at the top of that midfield, is Lando Norris. A driver that I've been critical of in the past and was always a bit sceptical whether it was too early to bring him into Formula 1. But I thought he was really good last year. Had torrid luck. Awful luck, Lando Norris. One of the worst drivers on the grid for luck. Off the top of my head, Belgium, a 5th place down the drain thanks to reliability. France, likewise. Germany, what could have been a podium, retired again from the Grand Prix with engine issues. Those 3 races alone pretty much make up the points difference to Sainz, but Sainz also had issues himself. But I think Norris, who's going to have the backing from the team, is going to have another year of experience. I think he's certainly one to watch in that midfield. Likewise with Ocon. And I think Pierre Gasly, if he can continue that form he had at the end of last year with Toro Rosso and bring it to AlphaTauri, that could be a really special driver to keep an eye on. So podiums, I'm going to go the top 6 drivers. Lando Norris, Sergio Perez. I would throw in a Ricciardo as well, but we don't know how many races there's going to be at the moment, so I don't want to go too crazy. And of course, I'd love to see a Haas podium at some point. Raikkonen up there would be fantastic. And do I think Williams will score points this year? Yeah, I do. I do. Will all 20 drivers score points? I'm not too sure. But it would be lovely if Williams could get points for both drivers. And I think I will end that little chat there. Very off the cuff, unscripted. Usually that's the content I like to do, just say what comes to mind. But I think that's concluded our little chat, our little preview, looking ahead, and our little predictions at the end. I'd love to know your crazy predictions in the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts on who's going to be world champion, who's going to be scrapping in that midfield, just how good are Williams and Latifi going to be. Keep your eyes peeled for a very different video coming out tomorrow, a bit of an announcement for the season up ahead. I cannot wait to release my preview for the Austrian Grand Prix on Thursday. I'm really trying to push the bar. I'm really trying to learn new editing tech. Just watch. I hope you enjoy. Thank you all for watching. If you are new and you want to keep up to date with Formula 1 2020 news, reviews, all that good stuff, subscribe button down below. Like if you enjoyed, dislike if you didn't. Helps me know what kind of content you enjoy and you don't. Happy days. Thanks guys for watching and hope to see you in the next one.